I just find a bit of humor in that. However, I am a Midwest girl. I was raised in Indiana. And I do want to say, you know, I made this big effort to come here in January, and it was actually January of 16, right, Nick? Wasn't it?
I think so, 16, 17.
Yeah, and so that was going to be really kind of my first out-of-state venture to get face-to-face with people, and they canceled the flight like the night before. It was just so horrid, and there was like no way, because I had like one day. I am a full-time attorney. I do this on a volunteer basis. I have to work and pay a lot of bills and stuff, so I maintain my law practice, but this is my passion. I have been practicing law for 25 years, and I went back to school after having another business, being in the restaurant business with my family for several years. Over 25 years, I have seen tremendous changes for the worse, okay? For the worse in family court and child welfare reform. I practiced in Nashville, Tennessee. I started as a prosecutor. I started prosecuting domestic violence and child abuse. So I was well aware of the prosecution system and the public defender's office and how all of that plays out, how all that works. So then I went into private practice, and I leaped into private practice. I had 3 children at home. I was working out of my home. I told everybody I had the best of both worlds. I could be a stay-at-home mom and a full-time lawyer, struggled through it. Anyway, opened an office, got out on my own, and started doing primarily family law. I was immediately stunned at just in the divorce court system of the things that I saw happen to families, the damage that I saw happen to families. And then I started crossing those boundaries of DCS cases, which is Department of Children's Services in Tennessee. For today, most of the time I'm probably going to refer to it as CPS because across state lines we know it as Child Protective Services. I have seen horrible things happen to families, and and I've had experts in different fields, and I started talking to people. I'm like, what is going on here? I've been talking to legislators for 10 years. What is going on? Oh, we know there's a bad problem. We know there's a problem. And nobody will do anything. And it's horrible. I represent a lot of families. I see families struggle. I see children being taken out of their homes and not sent back. I've seen teenagers be brainwashed into believing that their family doesn't want them anymore, that they can never go home. It is like, it's a world that we should not be living in. Many, many years ago, there was a movie out called Sophie's Choice. I don't know if anybody saw that movie, but I remember watching that movie, and it's about this woman who, when she was in Nazi Germany, and she's standing on the pad of the train station, and she has a little boy and a little girl in her arms, and a Nazi soldier comes up to her and tells her that he will take one of her children and let her keep the other one, or he will take both of them and they will die. And it's the most heart-wrenching moment that occurs in this movie, and you can see the grief and stuff in her face, and ultimately she says she can't choose, and ultimately she says, take my little girl, and this little girl is screaming, and they're hauling her off to this other train. Now that happens here in America. I have cases all the time through Facebook of people contacting me and say, you know what, DCS gave me one of my children back, but they won't give me the other one. I'm good enough for one of my children, or I'm good enough for 2 of my children, but I'm not good enough for all of them. It is happening. Why is it happening? It is happening because children are being monetized by our government. Children are being monetized by our government. There is a dollar sign on the head of every child in America. In America. You know, my children are now over 18, but you know what? I already got grandbabies. And I said to myself, if I don't do something, it may not happen to my children, and although I'm not going to go there, but they tried because I was fighting the system, they weren't successful. But my grandbabies are going to have children. And this problem has grown more and more and more and more. If we do not do something, those of us sitting in this room, if we do not do something, if we don't speak out, if we say no more, if we don't do that, it is going to continue and continue and continue. And it is not just child welfare, it is the healthcare system, it is education. And I'm telling you, as I stand here today in 2017, the next thing they're going to try to do is to privatize the educational system, and we will be in an even worse position. They don't want children homeschooled, they want to make money off of them. So child welfare, that is what we're dealing with today. Child welfare in the courts. Hey Nick, can you turn that around for me? So I can see it. So there's a couple things in an organized fashion I'm going to share with you today. One of them is I have asked everybody to have one of these pamphlets here. The first part is just a little bio of me. Not really important, just as I think it's important for you to know I have some credibility that I've been in the trenches with this for a long time. The second page is the mission statement of the Family Forward Foundation, which through a group of people that we're putting together a nonprofit. This is real important, the one that says resolution. I was this year able to get the National Federation of Republican Assemblies to adopt a resolution on the integrity of families. They are an organization, they're a very conservative organization within the Republican Party. They put their resolutions out in front of people who are running for office. They vet them in running for office. They support people, they promote them. I became a board member and a delegate for the National Convention, and I wrote this resolution and I got them to adopt it. And I'm going to tell you, they were clueless until I put this in front of them. I did that in Arizona just a few weeks ago. So read through that. All right, the next is 4 pages. It's called the Family Integrity Act. Now, if you aren't individually caught up in the system, when you read this Family Integrity Act, there are things in here that you will say, why, of course, why would it be any other way? For instance, secret reports filed with the court that parents never see, that attorneys never see, that they don't know what's happened. Secret reports. The right to, if a DCS or a CPS worker comes to your home and talks to you, they are basically accusing you of some type of criminal conduct. Child neglect is criminal. And the parent should be informed from day one that they have a right to counsel. Children, DCS and CPS workers going to school and interviewing children in schools without the parents' knowledge, taking these children out and putting them in private rooms and interviewing them. And you know, there was a representative, a state rep in Tennessee a couple years ago, and they proposed legislation that if a DCS worker was going to school, that they would have to either record it or they would have to have a third party present. And you know what? The state agency came in and lobbied against it. And they lobbied against it because they told the state reps, we don't want to do that, because if they go to school and they don't disclose any abuse, and then later they tell us about some abuse, why then we would have to give them that audio where they didn't disclose abuse. I said, that's called evidence. Evidence. Like I said, I was a DA. I know what criminal investigation is. And I will tell you, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, as a family law attorney, they used to record every interview. And they did it on the old magnetic tapes. And many times I walked into a DCS office with my tape recorder and I said, I want to hear that entire interview. And they stopped doing it. They stopped doing it. So the Family Integrity Act, this is kind of an omnibus bill. Now, legislators actually pass omnibus bills all the time. They do it. I have presented this to legislators and they are totally overwhelmed. They totally are overwhelmed. They're like, well, this is just way too much. We can't get it. You're going to have to pick out individual laws. But we need to hang on to this. Every one of you need to read it. And you need to understand that these are the rights, these are the responsibilities of the court, the responsibilities of the state, the rights of the parents, and the rights of the children. And the law is so broken. It is so broken. And I know the Tennessee law inside out. And I'm going to tell you probably, I mean, I've looked at several states. Most of them are all the same. They're in a different place, but they all say the same thing, right? So I know that law. we would have to take that entire code book, one of these entire books, and rewrite the whole thing, scratch out half of it, and start over. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. So please read through when you have time the Family Integrity Act. The last 2 pages, well, the next 2 pages are a discussion outline, and we're going to go through this video because this PowerPoint, because I do have things outlined on it that it's important to understand. But then as we close, what we haven't covered on this outline, because I use this outline in several meetings and talks and presentations, I want to make sure we touch on those if we have not. And then the final page, this is important, and these are not my numbers, because I know I've talked to some people who are like, well, I want to write for child welfare, or I want to advocate for child welfare, but every time I stick a statistic out there, they say, where did I get my numbers? You can get good numbers, okay? It's not a witchcraft. Okay, this is from the Casey Foundation. The Casey Foundation is a well-organized foundation. It was created by the man who was the founder of UPS, Jim Casey, and their goal, their reported goal, is to reduce the need for foster care. Not doing too great of a job at that overall, but they do have some good programs. But they collect data. There are also good data on a website called kidscount.org. Kidscount.org collects data from all the states, and states rely on it. Every state has a certain commission that is required to collect data. In Tennessee, it's the Commission on Children and Youth. You have something like that in Iowa, and you have something in every state. So one of the jobs, one of the things I'm going to ask you to do is you're going to find out who the commission or the agency or the organization is who is responsible for data. Now I'm going to tell you they don't collect all the data they need to collect. I'm going to tell you that. For instance, how many children go into foster care and then are removed from foster parents for abuse? They don't get that data, okay? How many children go into foster care and die? They don't collect that data either, all right? So they're not getting all of it, but we've got to start understanding the good data and who's collecting it. For instance, and I'm going to show you on here, kidscount.org pretty much lays out the fact that every state has a quota of the number of children that they need to take into foster care to keep their budget balanced. So this one on Casey Foundation, and it's got a nice little, I have one much more complicated, but this has a very nice little timeline of federal legislation. And this federal legislation ultimately today has created an imbalance that they hold out is 6-1. I say it's higher when you take Medicare and you take a lot of the other things that are involved, but at least it is 6-1. $6 for foster care versus $1 for relative placement, family preservation, family services. 6-1. What does that tell you? All right, now I'm going to go through this. This is what I call foster gate. Can you guys see that? Okay, do we need to turn some lights out?
Yeah, Jaime, can you grab those right over there? Thank you.
I call it foster gate. Yeah, a little more. Better? Is that better? And if I get in your way and you can't see it, just yell at me.